All right. Because it's been 2 weeks since I've done this. Welcome back, Double Teamed fam. How are we doing today? Today we welcome Cara Kovacs, who is a business coach for progressive leaders who want their income to match their impact, which is a great mission statement. You can't use that. Okay. So anyways.
It's not copywritten, but it would be weird if someone took it from this.
We saw it here first. Anyways, welcome.
Thank you both for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm excited. Now, this isn't a finance podcast or a business podcast, but
Please wait, hold on. You sound a little far away.
I do. Hold on.
Oh,
do I need
there.
to-
You sound
okay.
better now.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I know. I always get like when we meet people on Instagram and then we meet them in person, I'm always like, oh my God, it's like a whole new little experience.
No, I love it.
So you are non-monogamous and you identify, you told me, queer.
Ambiamorous and queer, yeah.
Okay, the first term, explain that.
Yeah, I mean, that was a term that was given to me by somebody I dated over the summer that was like so liberating. I hadn't heard it before either.
I haven't either, yeah.
It means that you could be in a polyamorous or a monogamous relationship construct.
That's how I've heard it
Yeah.
deconstructed before.
I now have a new identity. Okay, say it again. What is it called?
Ambiamorous, like ambidextrous.
Ambiamorous.
Yeah.
Well, I think like the great thing about a person who is liberated in how they express themselves, I think the beautiful thing is, it's always how you choose to define your relationships can always be fluid. So whether you
Exactly.
choose to be monogamous with one person or whether, in the next relationship you choose to be polyamorous, like if whatever feels like your truth at that time, then that's what it's going to be. And no one can like take that away from you or like, because I feel like there's always like that argument where it's like, oh, you're monogamous right now, so you're not poly anymore. And it's like, you can be both.
Or like you're with a man right now, so you're not bisexual.
That is the biggest. I'm also bisexual, so yeah.
That's why I like the word queer. Because
Yeah.
I think labels are important because they help you define yourself. Like I think a label can be really liberating. And then I also think like my entire life I've been very sex positive. I was like looking up sex parties when I was 17, clicking the yes, I'm over 18. Like watching HBO Real Sex in the Den in the middle of the night, hoping nobody would catch me, being like, I'm gonna like do that when I'm an adult. And then, I had a long-term monogamous relationship that ultimately we tried to save by like opening up at the end. So I think there's a long history in my life of just kind of not doing things in a traditional way that also I could totally be in a monogamous relationship. Maybe not forever, but for a time. And so I the flexibility to be like, it's kind of whatever mood I'm in right now.
Exactly.
And that's as much as I'd like to explain it actually for myself, because trying to define it more than that made me feel like I wasn't gay enough or I wasn't poly enough because I had to define it and it kept changing.
Yeah.
I really love that.
I mean, that's honestly like a lot of what my journey has felt like as well, because, I was like monogamous in my marriage and then we were open, or like monogamish and then we were open and then we were poly and then we divorced. And then, I was like solo poly. And then I was like, I don't know if I actually really am like super poly. Like I like it, but like I think long term I want more monogamish, or like swinging. So it's like I've been all over the place to the point where like sometimes I've gotten to it gave me an identity crisis. And so I like that this term is more like, it's just whatever I'm feeling at the moment and I'm good with that. And I don't need to give it any harsher labels than that. So yeah.
Let's talk about your grandma. That's a transition I wanted to make there.
Wait, I know, because that was your exposure to it.
Well,
Sort
not particular. So my mom was put up for adoption when she was, I think, a little older than 2.
Okay.
My grandmother was pro-dom in the 70s, and my mom got put up for adoption. But they have a relationship now. She was at Stonewall. She was in a throuple with a trans man and another man.
What a gal. What a queen. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know her growing up. They reconnected in my adulthood. But I come from a very my family is also an adoption family. So like my brother was adopted. We had step parents and like whoever was aunt or uncle was who my mom was really, really good friends with. So I think the way that we defined family was very much like, this is what we choose and not like a social definition. And my mom is a tarot card deck creator.
Yes!
Oh my God, I'm big on tarot.
And she's a psychic medium. So I think like
that.
my entire family history is like very fluid and very progressive and like,
Nonconformist.
yeah.
Love that.
And I think also
that's in
very
your
kind
blood.
of queer and kinky and out there too.
I
Like,
love that she was a pro dom.
yeah.
I love that your mom's a psychic. I want her info.
Oh, please. If anybody I can't tell you how many people I refer to my mom from Instagram. If anybody wants a reading with my mom, she is so fucking good. DM me and I'll connect you to my mom.
Does she give you readings?
Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of our like phone calls is we're just talking and then I'm like, can you just ask like while we're
Can you just
talking?
see what's
Getting
going on?
census today, Mom.
And the thing about her that I love so much, which I never get the chance to really talk about her on podcasts, but she's my best friend. But she has like no ego about it. You know, I think a lot of people, like myself included, my podcast is called Business Witch. A lot of my coaching clients are like witchy in orientation. Like I'm starting my business doing moon circles. I'm totally a witch. But like when I'm like communing with the divine in my apartment, it's very much from a place of like, I welcome divine knowledge. Like, if you want to give it to me, like I saw the candle flicker, but is it real? And my mom is very much like, oh yeah, there totally was a ghost in your room when you said that you saw that. I saw it too. And just like deadpan and like does it. She's just in total connection and like non-judgment, and it's just so obvious to her, and it's very beautiful and also like a little freaky.
Yeah. I love that you're combining like with Business Witch, for example, you've got like the business and career side, but like also with the woo-woo things, because like I do the same. And, I feel like for a lot of us that are becoming more, I call it woo-woo, for becoming more woo-woo, we're like starting to merge that with like not just like our love lives and our like personal lives, but also like our careers, and using that. Like I definitely pull tarot cards for my career all the time and like my business ventures. So, I'm glad to see that the two worlds are merging and that you're spearheading that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's on the one hand can just be straight up fun, right?
Yeah.
Like it's really fun to learn about yourself and like connect energetically to an intention. And I think anybody, whether they identify as witchy or not, like if you look at any thought leader who has a large following or a platform, like they used very intentional, energetic alignment within themselves. Like they closed their eyes and they thought about what it was going to look like when they achieved what it was that they wanted to achieve. That's what conjuring is.
Yeah.
Like just however you want to define it.
Give me a better set of instructions so I can go home and do this.
Okay, but also like let's also take into effect that like Walmart, Amazon, they all started during Cancer season. So like there's astrology and tarot being used for the big companies as well.
Oh yeah. And all the presidents had an astrologer. Like, and all the kings. I mean, astrology and astronomy used to be a unified science.
Yeah.
And then the scientific method was invented and they were like, oh, we can't prove astrology with the scientific method. So it like they separated. And then I think pop astrology, I mean, the way that I found out about y'all was that my friend Kira, who was on your podcast, who is an amazing astrologer, connected us. But I think that pop astrology is like, read for your sun sign what somebody wrote in the back of a magazine. Like that's not astrology.
No.
And if you think it isn't accurate because you haven't read what it actually is, that's probably why you feel that way.
There's actually a lot of math in it. I don't think people realize.
Yeah.
I know sometimes when I'm looking at aspects, I'm like, well, that's not within 3 degrees for it to be a trine. So, or 5 degrees, whatever it is. But I don't know. I mean, like, I think in general, it's interesting, like when you have a side of you that's like the conformist, like when it comes to your career or your, maybe like what you present to like the world. But then, we have a lot of the sides of us that are like nonconformist, and like usually those are the kind that we don't necessarily like always put out for everyone to see, like for example, like Cammie didn't know about my non-monogamous marriage for the first year that we were open. And then I kept it under wraps from like pretty much everyone until probably 3 or 4 years in. And then it wasn't until I started the pod that I was finally like, okay, Guess what?
Hey everyone, I have a little bit of tidbit of the news.
Yeah.
Can I ask why you waited to tell your sister?
Yeah, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I don't know what to call this, how to like really define it. I'm not saying that I invented open relationships because I didn't, but like I had zero exposure to it. So other than like I had 2 friends that we met in college that were like one time we were out with a guy and my ex and I, we were boyfriend girlfriend at the time. We like looked over at him and he was making out with some other girl that was not his girlfriend. And we were like, oh my God, are you cheating on her? And he was like, no, it's cool. She doesn't care, because they were like long distance or whatever. And so I was like, oh. So whenever we had that conversation of like, oh, maybe like when we're apart, we'll like go do things with other people and it'll be fine. Like we had no terms for it really. We were just kind of like, okay, I think, we have this agreement and that's cool. And then we were just trying to figure it out. And I had like a lot of, not shame, but like I didn't know how people will react to it. And so then finally I told Cammie about it really randomly one day at a rave. Yeah.
It's a good place to have that conversation.
Yeah. But also like I'm kind of thankful that she waited because I don't know. I feel like my mental state was all over the place in my early to mid 20s.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thankful you waited a year.
And then even
but
like
I thought her husband was cheating on her for 4 months. I wish you would have told me a little bit sooner. But anyway.
But yeah, I mean, so I hid a lot of pieces of myself. And then it wasn't until the pod that I was like actually a lot more open. But even like, I was doing witchy astrology, tarot shit long before I ever talked about it on the pod too. So it's like with a lot of things in my life, sometimes I'll just kind of keep it to myself until I figure it out and then, kind of be more open about it. I think the older I get, the easier it is to like be open up front right away as compared to previously when I was like, okay, let me just figure this out before I tell anyone about it.
Well, we could tie astrology to this because I've actually had this conversation with clients who like have a Scorpio rising who are like, privacy is a huge value of mine.
Yeah.
I don't want people to know things about me, not because I'm hiding them or I'm ashamed of them, but because I appreciate a separation or a distinction between like what my work is in the world and like what I do when it's not in a professional context. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. And like a lot of like personal preference that goes beyond like, are you not comfortable with who you are? It's like a way of being in the world. And my partner is very much like that. Like he's an incredible creative and he wants his work to be about his work. And he doesn't want it to be about like what he does on the weekends with potentially other people. And then I think that there are people who are here because they're comfortable sharing. I'm a Leo rising. Like
I see that.
Yeah. Like, how could you tell? The hair is always a giveaway. But like to me, it takes more energetic effort to try to hide things about who I am. Like it feels uncomfortable and weird. And I think that the benefit for that is to be, for some people, an example that they didn't have. I remember I published an article that I'm not even going to go into details about because I don't want anyone to look it up because I'm sure it's super cringe. But I published an article about a date I went on with my like now best friend who I met on Tinder like 2015. No, a woman.
Okay.
And I remember at the time just being like, I want to share about like going on a date with a girl. And like I didn't even know where I was at with my queer journey at that point. But so many women, particularly women I went to high school with, like over a dozen women I went to high school with, messaged me to say that I like spoke to something that they had felt curiosity about, but like hadn't had the courage to either express or experience. I don't think everybody needs to be that person for everybody else. And I also don't think I'm like martyring myself or doing some kind of service. I'm like being who I am. And I think that that's to be celebrated. And if being who you are is to be private and like position yourself in the world in a different way, like that is also beautiful. And one thing I do want to add to this is it's not safe to be poly in some states, like to be out and be poly in some states, like the government could come and take your kids. And I like the entire queer rights movement, the entire LGBT movement exists on the backs of people who were like, I'm going to be out even though it's not safe. Like we need people like that. And there's so many nuances that we could go into about like transphobia and like LGBT hate and like all of the horrible things that are happening in our country right now, that make the politics of what it means to be out in polyamory like a very different subject. But what I've personally experienced is like a lot of delegitimizing of my relationships. Like, oh, it's not real because you're never going to live together. And it's like, I've been in love with this person for years. Like, is what makes it real cohabitation, or what makes it real the level of investment that I have to like deeply care for and show up for this person that has like been so profoundly life-changing and beautiful and given me so much? Like, what makes a relationship legitimate? You don't get to define it. I get to define it.
I love what you said about, you know, how you were like comparing, you know, like the people that want to be private versus like the people that want to be maybe more like out about whatever it may be, whether it's, you know, if you're woo woo or poly or, you know, queer, whatever. Because like even, you know, some people, they may be like out in terms of like their, you know, when it comes to queer, for example, I had a coworker, like he was out to us long before he was ever like more out about it to like, you know, clients or anything like in our field of work. And so it's like, you know, in any of those aspects, like, what I was going to say was I love that that you mentioned that there's beauty in both. Cause like I personally am someone that I like to see kind of like the person behind whatever they're creating, you know, it's like how that ties into like the story of what they're creating. For example, like when you mentioned your partner, like I, you know, as much as I understand and value people's privacy, I also love to see like when you kind of see the whole backstory of something as well. So, but there is beauty in both. I like both.
Well, I think there's always like that one, you know, the argument. It's like a lot of people are like, oh, okay, you know, I've been poly or I'm non-monogamous, whatever. And then they're like, when do I tell X person?
Yeah.
And it's like, do you want to tell them? Do you want to be out about this? And then it's like, you know, with your other partners, do they want to be out? You know, then you got to take a lot of people into consideration. But I think it, you know, it also, I like, for example, for me, there are some things like, and this is why I keep like my personal Instagram private, is because like, there's just some things that I want to keep to myself. Like, I'll just, you know, I don't need to tell anybody, or I don't want, you know, just because everybody follows me on the podcast doesn't mean they need to follow my personal account. I have like over 1,000 friend requests of people I don't know. And I'm just like, well, if I don't know you, I'm not going to accept you into my private Instagram because I don't want to.
Yeah.
So
not that they're missing much. You never post. But
there really isn't. You're not missing much, guys. I promise.
I also write about the safety of it too. I think that's always a big one, like in any of those things.
Yeah, I wrote about that on Instagram today, that like we live in a time that anybody for any reason can contact you whenever they want, which is insane. Like I've been propositioned for sex work in my DMs. I've had people write the entire history of their childhood trauma, like completely unprovoked. And I'm like, I don't want to respond to you just because you sent, like anybody can send you anything. Yeah. And I think not wanting to be in a space like that, when I work with clients around visibility, because a lot of my clients think, oh, I need a big following in order to make money, which by the way is not true.
Correct.
But beyond that, it's like you think you want a big following because you think you'd have more clients, but actually you subconsciously don't want to be witnessed in that level of scrutiny. Like you don't want that. You just think that you need that. And like working through that with someone as a mental block is like, and in my own business as well, like I would say that I have like what somebody might think is a large following and what somebody else might think is not a large following. I have like 12,000 followers who... my business exists probably for like the 300 people who are super down about what I'm talking about in that people. Like,
you just gotta capture that 1% that's really into it.
I'm like talking to and engaging with and creating content and selling programs to those people. And like, sure, other people are welcome and like, it's nice to meet you. Welcome to this corner of the internet. But like, if my Instagram was only those 300 people, I would be making the same amount of money.
Exactly. Yeah, I think especially like with followings on social media, like, you know, I think everybody idolizes like, oh, you have 1 million followers, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's like also like, you know, sometimes you don't want those 1 million people just constantly
we
looking
always
at
talk
you.
about how like, you know, sure, numbers are great, but at the end of the day, like I want people that are actually down for what the hell I'm talking about, not just because they're there to watch me like flounder. Or is that the right word?
Yes, Little Mermaid it is.
Well, no, it's true. Like I want people that like are aligned with me. That's what I would want like in a following.
I don't want just people. I want the people that are there to build community.
What I was going to ask you was, because like, for example, you say that you're the business witch, which by the way, I love, but that automatically, like you're putting two things that you wouldn't normally put together, business and witchiness. And so like, obviously you're probably attracting the people that are nonconformist in some way, but obviously still, entrepreneurs, business people that want to like have good careers, all of that. And so like, when it comes to like maybe the pieces of them that aren't like totally conformist, like how do you go about like, I guess my question would be, how do you work through those things? Or like, how do you like, it's like you said, for example, the Scorpio rising, where it's like, you want to be more private. Like if you're going to bring astrology or like other things into it in general that aren't like normal in like the career and the business terms, like how do you get to a place where like they accept those pieces of themselves and like figure out how to like incorporate or not incorporate them into their business?
Yeah, thank you for that question.
Did it make sense? That was really weird. Okay.
I'll respond and you tell me if this was not your question.
Okay.
I think that looks different for every person.
Yeah.
Cause the other thing I'll say is I have a social work background. So I thought I was going to become a therapist. I went to grad school for social work. And then I was like, y'all are telling me you're going to pay me $53,000 a year and I'm spending $60,000 a year on this degree. I don't think I could do it. So I actually dropped out of social work school and was very much on the wave of that. Like, oh, I can make $10,000 plus a month being a life coach. Sign me up. Like that was literally how I got into coaching. But it really was built on the back of like working in social services. So I worked in a domestic violence center. I worked in a nonprofit legal services agency. So I worked with a lot of clients who had experienced pretty extensive trauma. And the way that that's relevant to business coaching is, yes, I focus pretty heavily on strategy. Like I am the kind of coach that's like, if you work with me, we're going to go into the back end of your systems, because I think what a lot of business coaches miss is they're like, we're going to work on your mindset. Just believe that you can make 10K months and then you will. You didn't believe hard enough and that's why it didn't work. I'm sorry if anybody feels called out. Also, I am probably calling you out. But
I feel like I've seen a creator do that before.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It happens in the industry. Like those people are great for their people. That's not how I work. Because the issue with that is like, you can't mindset your way into a funnel or a system that doesn't work to support to call the people in. So like I'm very strategic with people. So I do mindset and I do strategy. But then when people come in, really what we're talking about is like their fear of being seen for who they really are and how that's blocking their ability to authentically connect with people and cultivate an audience. Or create one client, like, they go to a networking event and they're so afraid that like they're going to come across as salesy. So like they don't even bother telling somebody about what they do. So we're working on that kind of stuff. And all of that is rooted in like childhood wounding about how worthy you think your opinions are, or how much you believe in the prospect of your own success, or the kind of trauma that you have around money and like what it means to actually be paid for your services. So depending on the person, it's always a different thing. And it's not just like, oh, we identified it in a session. It's comes with practice, which my own business, it came, so much from practice. It was like, I'm just going to keep getting on sales calls until I stop being nervous when I get to the part where I talk about the money. And that took me a couple of years. And I think the way that this also relates to polyamory is like, the first few times you talk about it with people, you might feel really nervous about their reaction, or really nervous to feel like you have to like explain yourself. Or like prove, like in the beginning of my longest relationship that I'm in currently, there was a lot of invalidating of the relationship from the people in my life, because he lives with a long-term partner. And when I entered that relationship, there was a lot of like, what's your end game here? Like, why are you even doing this? Or like, well, this isn't actually what you're looking for. Is this like a stop on the way to what it is that you're looking for? Or like, he must not really love you that much, or like, are you just questions that are so not the point, that you would never ask anybody in a monogamous relationship, and had nothing to do, like, we're all just the projections of other people's feelings about how they would be if that was a situation that they were in. And I think that that is what happens in entrepreneurship too. Like when I started my business, my aunt was like, you need a 401k. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you needed a 401k to feel safe. Like you needed that. Or like, I can't help you. You know, I couldn't get a guarantor to sign for an apartment when I started my own business, and nobody would give me an apartment because I was living in New York, and like you needed a W-2. So I just sublet for a year because nobody would like let me sign a lease. And that's the projections of other people. Like you're unsafe in this situation that you've created for yourself. And to actually go on the journey of deconstructing, well, that's just what everybody else says, but I'm going to build inside of myself resilience and safety to trust that not only can I make money, but I'm going to out earn my salary like 4 or 5 times over what I was making before. So fuck all y'all. And like, I'm safe, like, because I decided. And I think in my relationship too, it's like, actually, I'm so in love with this person. And like, I feel like I have, I don't know, magical pink bubbles flying out of my ears all the time when I think about like the joy that I get to have being in this relationship. Like, that's what I want love to be for me, not let me get married because then I'll be safe. Like that's your construct of that. Like I'm not available for your projections. I'm over here doing like what I want to do with myself. And I think that that's the journey that like any poly person or any queer person or any entrepreneur or any person who has been like othered and has to consciously reflect on what does it mean to be othered, and like how do I want to define for myself what my value is in opposition to what society told me it should be, is like the most fun and also terrifying journey that like anybody could go on.
I see why you have those 300 clients.
I was about to say, I very rarely do I meet life coaches that I'm like, yeah, you should be a life coach. You should be. It's true. No,
You just got me to cackle.
Most of the time I meet them and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. But listening to you talk is like, well, a lot of things. In the beginning when you were talking about how like the ones that I always like, just believe, you didn't believe hard enough. You literally broke down what it means to believe following that when you talked about breaking down traumas and, you know, working through like the blockages that we have in our own mindsets that keep us from believing and like all of that. And then on top of that, love the parallel between entrepreneurship and polyamory or non-monogamy in general, because entrepreneurs are following their own path, you know, in a career. They're not settling for a 9-to-5. They're not settling for, you know, just a W-2. Cookie cutter path.
And go home.
Exactly. Same with non-monogamous. Like we look at monogamy and we're like, you know what, it's not for us right now. Let's try something new. But like, there's no roadmap for it. So, love that parallel because it's true. And I love the term that you used, othered. You know, we're others. Like we're not
following
that same path. It reminds me of my favorite Robert Frost quote,
which is
the road less traveled.
Oh, that's a poem, Nicole.
Yeah, it's a poem. Yeah, but what is it? The road less traveled, and that made all the difference.
Yeah.
At the end, that's a good one.
Wait, okay, so hold on. Let's go through. Can we talk about the structure of your relationship? So you have a partner, and who lives long term with another partner. Okay, so you have a meta.
Yeah.
And then do you have any other additional partners?
Not right now, but my DMs are open.
Okay, all right, yeah. This is a dating service too. We're called Double Teamed for a reason.
I will say I have a success kink, and I would prefer that you be local, particularly not on the west side, because I don't want to drive over there.
I get that. Yeah. No, anything on the other side of the 405 is a long distance relationship.
I got an invite to a party today. That's east of the 405.
We are east of the 405.
I know. That's what I'm saying. We're east of the 405, but I guess most of their demographic is west side. Anyways, it was like, I hope you have your passports ready because this party's east of the 405. And I'm like, what?
I know. I'm like, I imagine whoever I date next lives in Silver Lake, but that could be a limiting belief.
Pull out those blockages.
Okay, so you have a success kink. Like, do you like to... Okay, wait. So let's talk about your relationship real quick. So,
to whatever extent that you want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Whatever
I feel protective of it. I do, because they're much more private than I am.
But I really like, you know, when you were talking about, what was it?
Are you BFFs with the other partner?
No, it's a parallel structure. I've never met this person.
How long have y'all been
I think
together?
that's totally fine, by the way, because I have been in a kitchen table dynamic, and I liked it. I didn't mind it, but I definitely think that sometimes parallel is also totally fine.
Yeah.
And things
No, I
don't
think
always,
they're all valid.
yeah, they're all that. They don't always need to intersect, because I do think a lot of times, like in non-monogamy or poly, like there's always this kind of like pressure to like everyone should be like best friends and like meet everyone and da da da. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that. And you know, we've definitely been in our fair share of, you know, kitchen table dynamics, and I love it. But at the same time, like sometimes it is totally okay to be parallel, and I hate the judgment that some of those people get
I was
in the
going to
parallel
say, that's
structures.
probably what you get is a lot of judgment of people being like, well, why the fuck are you in this? You know?
I mean, I'm in the current relationship that I'm in because it makes me very happy and I love him very much. And like, that's the gist of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. I love how much
You're
like
probably
you.
you can say it. Y'all have great sex. Say it on here.
I feel like it's almost time for a subject change because I can just imagine him melting as he like listens to the playback of this episode.
Wait, are you super? Like, for example, like you say, you know, you're like open about, you know, quite a few things. Like when it comes to like, I guess sex in general, would you say you're?
Oh, I started as a sex coach. I should
Oh.
probably say my first certification was a sex coaching certification.
Wait, you
And-
went from sex coaching to like business?
because when I was profitable, I realized what I was talking about in sex coaching, which is like the deconditioning of social constructs to feel more empowered. Entrepreneurship is the same thing.
yeah,
It really is.
all
And-
these parallels, I'm like, wow, okay. keep going.
And I also just like really enjoyed the process of entrepreneurship, and it lit me up, and it was like a very natural, easy transition. But yeah, I have a women's studies degree, so like and I think again, like with my grandma and like the watching HBO real sex in the den in the middle of the night, like I'm just a very sex positive person. Little shout out because I think she is amazing, and I'm sure y'all have heard of her, but I did poly coaching with Dedeker Winston after I got into this relationship, and it was so necessary because what I will say is, despite being like super sex positive, being in a construct like this, especially coming in as a secondary partner, and though I was like monogamish with my long-term partner and had a history of going to play parties, and like, you know, my best friend who I met on Tinder, the one I wrote the article about, is like a relationship anarchist, polyamorous person. So it's so great to have her, you know, in my life. Being in a poly relationship triggered every single attachment wound and like was so hard and intense in the beginning. So I think for people who loved me, a lot of the judgment came from that of like, you seem like you're losing your mind. Because in many ways I was like really triggered and anxious and having my own existential questions of like, yeah, am I only looking for poly people now? Or if I met a monogamous person, would I end this relationship? Like there's a lot of questions that come up. And she was foundational to helping me work through that.
Dedeker's amazing.
So good.
I work with her often. We're in the same
She's
network,
on the same
so,
network
yeah.
that we are.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Multiamory is on this network. Yeah. Love Multiamory. But yeah, I think like, you know, you can be really sex positive and also really desire healthy love and have a bunch of stuff that you need to work through, even if you've been in healthy relationships in the past, because I think polyamory does press on a lot of bruises that maybe you thought you healed, but still are there.
Yeah. No, I'm still on my healing journey. It is
Forever.
ongoing. You know, it's funny because like at first when you said that, I was like, how interesting to jump from sex coaching to like more business coaching. But then as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, oh no, that makes actual perfect sense. And on top of that, I really do think like a lot of people would be better in almost every facet of their life if they fixed a lot of their wounds when it comes to like their sexuality and their relationships. So, because like I do think that can trickle into your you know, like your business, your career, all of that stuff. For I like what comes to mind is one of my friends, he was complaining about his boss, how like his boss always like micromanages and like never, you know, like they'll do the work and then he'll be like, oh well, you know, I should have done da, 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 da. And I'm like, when he was telling me all of this, I like listened and then I was like, that's not a reflection of like you or anything that you're doing. Your boss just doesn't trust himself. And so he's micromanaging everyone because like he doesn't trust, or the way that he had worded it is like the guy doesn't like, Shit, I forgot the story. Anyways, what it came down to was the guy didn't trust his ability to lead his people. And that's why he had to like micromanage them, because it's like he couldn't give them the trust of like, oh, you got this, handle it, It was like all a reflection of like his own insecurities. And so I was like thinking about that. I'm like, if, you know, he went and did some of the work that he needed to do on like his end and, you know, trusting himself and his decisions and the people that he put in place, that would probably fix itself and everyone would probably work a lot better in general.
Mm-hmm.
So
I pay $500 for referrals. So
I'll send them over. And it made me think of like, for example, you know, my boss that I had in my corporate job back when I was a corporate girly, he never micromanaged us. He was a very confident man. He trusted his decisions, very like, at least from what I saw, very like secure in himself and his, you know, everything that he always came off as someone that like really trusted that in some ways. And so it's like, you know, that trust then reflected onto us. And, you know, we always felt like we had like the freedom to do what we needed to do. And he never really stepped in unless it became absolutely dire and like we needed him to step in. But for the most part, he was like, you got it. I'm here if you need me, but like, you got it. And so, and that gave us like more confidence as like people in general. So, yeah.
one of the things that I help companies do is build non-traditional managerial structures. So, which is very much like non-traditional relationship structures.
Yeah.
Where it's like you are hiring somebody who maybe isn't 100% qualified, but like really cares about the mission, and you want to invest in teaching them how to be good at the role, as opposed to employing somebody who maybe has a societal advantage and that's why they have the experience. And actually I worked with a company based here in LA to build what they were calling a non-hierarchical managerial structure, where they didn't want the managers to be like superior to the people that were reporting to them. And so we built like a communication style that could be supportive to having a non-traditional employee base.
Love that. So me boss, not boss.
I love this because I'm sure the non-hierarchical polyamorous people are like, yes.
It's a kitchen table dynamic in this company.
Everyone has equal say in the importance of specific business decisions. Yes. So yeah, there are a lot of parallels. And I do think it's true. Like if somebody is micromanaging their team, like, is that about their trust in their team, or is that about like them putting all of the responsibility on themselves because they think if they don't, everything will explode? And where did that, like, where's the origin story behind that? And that people come to me being like, oh, I want to have more success in this area. And then we end up talking about like when they were 8.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's like therapy. I feel like the more of us who do therapy, the better businesses will be.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's true. If I ever owned like a company with multiple employees and everything, like people that worked under me, everyone would have a mandatory therapy session with like a therapist that I kept on the payroll. Probably once a week at least, or once every other week. I don't know, something like that.
Once a month is fine.
Once a month.
We don't need to spend too much money on that.
You should start a business. Well, one thing I'll say is like the idea of coaching progressive leaders specifically for me is like there's a social impact piece to that. So white men control 98% of capital wealth, which is not surprising, but it's like I find that a lot of the communities that I'm in, we all agree with each other. So we're all sitting around, you know, my living room coffee table complaining about the same issues. But if we don't actually get more access to capital, like who do you think is funding research? Like, why do you think male birth control hasn't been invented yet, but we have such limited research on menopause? Like when white men control 98% of capital, it impacts what gets funded. It impacts political campaigns. It impacts like the infrastructure. Small business owners donate 250% more to charity than corporations do. So like when progressive leaders make more money, we allocate that money to mutual aid and to funding the political campaigns that like we're going to need to see funded in 2024. So there's a huge initiative for me to be like, I want to see y'all make more money because I want to live in the society that exists when you have more money.
Exactly. I want to get to the point where like, I want the politician to be like, I have 4 husbands, you know, like I want to know that, you know, they go to sex parties on the weekend, like, or, you know, they have a really fun life and go to therapy. Like, I don't care if you're the governor of whatever state. Like, I want to know that you're still like a good person inside and you know how to be a functioning member of society.
And they're all going to sex parties anyway.
Oh, they are. Trust me, I've been to enough sex parties to know I see more CEOs and, you know, business leaders than anything. But also, I love what you're saying about the allocating funds to everything. Cause like, I've always thought like if I was someone that like had a very successful business and made a lot of money,
Not if, when.
you're right. When I am a millionaire, maybe billionaire, who knows? Libras do make the highest percentage of billionaires.
I
Anyways,
didn't know that.
yeah, majority of billionaires are Libras, and Kimmel and I are Libras.
Sun and moon.
Sun and moon. Anyway,
Oh, wow.
but one thing that I would allocate like a lot of money to, or that I'd love to do research on, is like especially people with like autism or things like that. Remember that guy that I met at basically studying their sexuality and like studying like the ways that like maybe we can understand more about like how they connect sexually, because like I think a lot of those people, you know, like people are so focused on just like how they interact like with other people, because like it's so you know, that's kind of like the forefront of it. You know, they don't necessarily have like the social skills that like I think we completely forget about like their sexualities and love patterns. And so it's like I feel like I would love to see more research that like helps them in, you know, or, you know, ways that we can aid them in figuring more of that stuff out as well. Because like I don't think they, you know, when they're studying like the minds and things like that, it's for, you know, mainly social interactions. Like I don't think they study anything about like their bodies for like sexual or physical interactions. So I don't know if I explained that right, but that's kind of what I would love to do.
I mean, I want more money just so I can help animals, but that's me.
I know, it's like those memes that are like, how will you know when I win the lottery? There will be no signs.
Yeah.
And then there's like 50 dogs. Yeah.
Cammy will have a farm.
I will.
But yeah, that's what I would put research towards. Yeah. And I would love to see more research towards male birth control. That would be so nice.
I know.
Surely
me
it can't
too.
be that hard.
So for your clients, like, especially if they are poly or non-monogamous or queer, whatever, like, how do you find that most of them are willing to like tell people or
be open about, or be upfront, or
I have poly
incorporate
clients
it?
who are out, and then I have poly clients who are not out.
Yeah.
But one thing I'll say is it's very fun to have poly clients because you can use metaphors
Yeah.
in the coaching that wouldn't make sense to other people. And I can't think of any specific examples right now, but there's like a way in which there's such a language that has been cultivated, or even I'm making this up, but this is not from like, you know, my client roster, but like, for example, if you were feeling like jealousy or comparison to people who you perceive to be more successful than you, and like taking the approach of compersion and being like, what does it look like to see them as demonstrating what can be possible for you, as opposed to like being more successful than you, and using like a poly metaphor, like just having that shared language is really fun.
Yep.
And like, do I need my entire client roster to be poly? No. Like, I like helping people who aren't necessarily poly, but I do love having that shared language. It adds like a lot of richness to the work I've found.
I'm curious, for the ones that aren't, you know, or the ones that are like open about it, or in what ways like have they found the safety, or like have they given themselves like the permission or the structure to like be more open about it?
Well, one thing that I'll say is that I find that they're like me, where it's like I posted about being poly like less than a month after I entered my current relationship, which prior to that, I always kind of assumed I would end up in like a monogamish relationship structure. So it wasn't like I was having this huge personal revelation, but it was more like, oh, I learned a lot about from just deciding that I'm going to do this. And I wanted to share about it immediately. Yeah. And I've even thought about that, like coming on this podcast, of like, I haven't talked about this side of myself recently. Mostly I've just been talking about business on lots of other and to be like, okay, like, let me go to my partner and see like, what does he feel comfortable with me sharing? And like, let me define for myself what I feel comfortable sharing. And like, why is it important to share? I feel sort of like the thing I'm most protective of is like other people's feelings. Like this is who I am. Like, if you're not down with it, please unfollow, because I only want my 300 super fans. So I find that the clients who I have that are out are kind of like me in that respect, where it's like just something about who they are is like, this is who they are, take it or leave it. That's not to say that they don't care about other people's opinions. That's not to say that like it doesn't feel vulnerable, because even certain parts of this conversation have felt vulnerable for me. But it is just to say that like that seems to be an innate thing about who they are. Whereas the other clients that I have who aren't out, some of them it's a philosophical question, kind of like yourself, of like, well, I've been doing this for a year or 2 years. Do I owe anybody an explanation? I currently, and I think this is something that, you know, comes up a lot in my own dynamic. I currently live with someone I'm married to, and there is a privilege, a societal couples privilege inherent in that like I will lose if I have to start explaining my marriage to people. And like, either I'm not ready for that or I don't desire to do that. And then for other people, it's like, that's not anybody's business and it has nothing to do with my work in the world. Yeah. For me, like it feels very strongly like it has something to do with the work that I do in the world. It really does. But that's me. And the kind of approach I take also as a practitioner is like, we're building your version of a business. We're not taking the model that I've created and then replicating it. Yeah. It won't work. So like, what's your version?
Yep. I mean, I feel like
the alignment definitely matters there. I agree. You know, it's like if you feel like if you want the alignment with like more of like your personal values, or like if you want to keep the two separate, which I think both are totally valid, you know, at the end of the day.
And I feel like sometimes if you just say something with confidence, like no one's going to question it.
Yeah, that too. So if you're just like,
if
if you own
I'm
it,
starting this business, I've been doing this for 5 years. I'm also, you know, polyamorous and I own 2 cats. And then that's it. You know, like you don't explain yourself further. You know, sometimes, and then when people like kind of backlash and give you those questions, sometimes if you just let them be, then it's like, okay, well, I've given you enough information that I wanted to, like, take it or leave it.
But I think at the, you know, with that as well, like it can also just be about like, then, you know, like maybe those people aren't in alignment with you, and and then, you know, they move on. And so that's like how you build like the foundation of the following or the people or the clients or whatever that you want.
Totally. Can we go back to talking about my success kink, because I want to accurately filter the DM pitches I get.
Yeah, what is a success kink? Actually, I haven't heard that one.
I like successful people.
Yeah, that's basically what I mean. I want to be with somebody who's as obsessed with what they're doing in the world as I am.
Oh, like, and that's all part of alignment.
And I have been with people who like I can be friends with anybody. I love people, but I have found being able to share in both intellectually and also kind of like spiritually in the like tenacity and passion that comes from having a mission that you are obsessed with has been so valuable for me. And I don't think I would really be able to date somebody who I didn't share that with. And that's not a judgment. It is a kink.
No, I think like for me, for example, like because there are a lot of things that like I'm really passionate about too. You know, I'm passionate about the podcast, but then I'm also passionate about, you know, whether it's like animals or tarot or astrology. And it's like, I want to connect with someone that's also equally passionate. It doesn't have to be about the same thing, but about like something, you know, that they really, like you said, tenacity, like they put that drive towards it. Because it's like, if we're both like chasing things, you know, with like equal vigor, then it's like, then you know that that person's going to keep up.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's what I want. I want someone that keeps up with me.
Exactly.
I'm someone that, you know, is always going after a ton of things, you know, and like I've always been a very driven person. So like I would like a partner that would want the same things, like in whatever their field they're pursuing.
Yeah. And like, you don't have to be an entrepreneur, but like be obsessed with what you're doing. Like be passionate about what gets you out of bed in the morning.
I remember I went on a date with one guy, and he's like he's I guess like a music producer, but he's like really passionate about it. And like, you know, I'm over here explaining like, I work from home and, you know, I really love my job, and I, you know, I'll, you know, usually work and go to the gym, come back, work a little bit more, you know, feed my pets, go to the park, whatever, work a little bit more. And he's like, I'm in the office like 10 hours a week. I'm like, or 10 hours a day. I'm like, but the fact that he was like really like, you know, and you could just tell like the way he spoke about it, he was so into what he was doing that he loved putting those like 10, you know, 12 hours in a day into work. I was like, oh wow, okay, like that's really dope. Like I really value that. I think that was the most attractive thing I found about him. Everything else I was like,
Reminds me of the chef. You know, he was sitting there cooking for me and just making this. I was on a date with a chef once at his house. He was cooking for me, and the whole time, you know, he was talking, he like just put together this dish like no recipe, he just like tried stuff here and there and was like, no, I'm just gonna change this. And then at the end of the day, it was the best meal I've ever had. And I was like, honestly, like you're cute, but like I wouldn't normally fuck you, but just based on that alone, I would fuck you. But this whole conversation, I really enjoyed because like and I'm sure you know this about yourself, but like everything that you do is out of alignment. And so like all these parallels that you're finding, it's because at the end of the day, you're truly looking for alignment in everything that you do. I think that speaks to your success, in what you're doing and like what you're looking to do. So even the success kink, all you really truly want is like someone that is like aligned in a very strong purpose and like, going towards it. So
I want to be a power couple.
Yeah. All of it.
I want to
like,
be on
together.
the sub side of a power couple.
I get that. I'm also submissive. So.
But I think at the end, like that's truly like everything that you've talked about, like that's really kind of what it comes down to. And I think that's great because like not only in spirituality, we all believe in alignment and everything in spirituality, but also like in entrepreneurship, in, helping other people and, how they can be more successful in, your relationships and everything. Like if it all comes down to truly feeling aligned with where you are at your core, like that's what's going to put you on the path to success. So.
Well, that's a very lovely compliment. Yeah. I will say, like, there are times where I've been like, should I just throw my entire business in the garbage? Because sometimes it's a lot of work and you are opening yourself up to having to be a champion for something, when you're burnt out. And this is why I have my own coach, right?
Yeah.
But I think like it actually gives me a lot of joy to be able to be who I am in a way that other people get to witness. Like that's the Leo rising. Like, I want to be seen being that way. So I appreciate you seeing that in me.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I mean, I love this podcast. I've been doing it for 2 years. I plan to keep doing it for a long time.
You got at least 8 more years with us, fam.
I worked on 2 other projects over the summer that like I'm hoping to get out and, they're all onto their next steps. And like all these things bring me a lot of joy. They do take a lot of work. And I'm not kidding when I say half the time I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? I should just quit. I'm done. And then, or I'm like, what was I doing here? I think I'm ready to move on from it. Or like even with non-monogamy, sometimes I'm like, you know what? Monogamy sounds really easy and chill right now. Like I just maybe should go for that. So I think it's natural for all of us to like have those moments. But then at the end of the day, like there's always something that like shows me, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing it. What like with the pod, when someone writes in, or like with my other 2 projects, I'll like go back and like, I haven't told anyone about them, so I'm being very cryptic, but like something that pulls me right back in, then I'm like, oh yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
So.
And I think in relationships too.
In relationships
like,
too,
sometimes like
your partner's
my
annoying
partner
you and you're
is
like,
late and I'm like,
you.
I don't want to date you anymore because you're late. I'm a fucking Virgo. You should have been here 25 minutes ago. Every minute that's passing, I'm counting. He was late on Saturday.
So I get it. I'm chronically late to everything.
We were actually early today. I was impressed.
Oh yeah, you told me to be here 10 minutes early. I was 15 minutes.
I know you said you were going to come early, so I was like, oh fuck, okay, we got to come early.
I annoy everyone in my life with how early I am. Like it stresses people out. I have to own that it is me that is the problem about that.
Yeah,
it would never work. Not that I'm not bi, but just. What's funny is when my ex was a Leo sun, Leo moon, he was always on time to everything. Every single time I was late to something, he would bring it up. He'd be like, it's 10 minutes. Why are you 30 minutes late? I'm like, well, sorry.
I'm always the first person at a party, and I intend to be like 15 minutes late out of like politeness because I know you're not supposed to show up to parties on time.
Yeah.
And I'm still always the first person there.
That is not
usually an hour late.
We are Latina.
One thing I was going to say is that I like that you said about the part of like being a champion for something, but like sometimes it can you still have to like take the brunt of like people's judgment or questioning of something.
Yeah.
Because I remember like, whenever I have a friend who, she was like, well, I really want to start a podcast about my non-monogamy journey. And I was like, yeah, go for it. She's like, but then sometimes, your comment sections can get really out of hand. And it's like, she's like, I don't know if I could handle that. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes you just gotta
ignore it.
take it.
But yeah, you take it. Yeah, you take it.
I had a social media expert on my podcast, and she gave me this idea, which I want to share with y'all and also your audience. She was like, she says every couple of months, I literally just post a picture of an evil eye. And then the caption is like, this is a spell. I am not open to your negative projections.
Yeah.
Like if you are looking at me and wishing me hate, comparing yourself to me and feeling more negative about yourself, thinking what I'm doing is wrong. Like if you're literally following me because it invokes like a negative energy, unfollow me. And she's like, every time I post that, I lose 100 followers.
Good for her, though. Good riddance.
Have that confidence.
Yeah,
though,
good
you know?
riddance.
Just at that point, it's like sometimes, especially, you know, whenever we'll get like negative comments or whatever, I'll just go block everyone. I'm like, I don't even want you seeing my content anymore. I don't care that you might have said something that wasn't even that like negative, but it doesn't seem like you're in alignment with this post. Block.
Yeah, this is like, it's like your house. This is my living room. I'm inviting you into my digital living room.
Exactly.
Like, take your shoes off, be polite, or leave.
Yeah.
Well, for those that want to enter your digital living room, how would you like to plug yourself?
Only if you have kind intentions. You don't have to even want to be an entrepreneur, but if you have kind intentions or you want to see,
spell. Keep going.
this is a spell. This is a spell. Or you want to see like photos of my dog, which she's the best branding decision I ever made. Cara Kovacs Coaching on Instagram and carakovacs.com. And my podcast is called Business Witch, and you can check that out on all platforms. And we have tons of great, very, very witchy guests, including, if you go back far enough, an episode with my mom.
Love that.
Can't wait to get to know your mom.
She's so cute. She's
I
like
love-
a fairy. She's like this tall. So cute.
I love psychics and mediums. You know a lot of good ones.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I loved talking about the parallels in like business and polyamory, but also just like whether you're coming out in that or not. And so it was a good conversation.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you definitely it gave me a lot of different perspectives on some things, so I appreciate it. And guys, if you want to find us, you know where, doubleteampodcast.com or our like million social media pages at Cami and Nikki, at Double Team Podcast on Instagram, at Double Team Podcast on TikTok, and also on Twitter, even though I'm not on there. Camilla is.
Those are all just my unhinged thoughts by now. There's nothing about the podcast on there. And as always, guys, wear condoms. Be safe out there. Okay. We love you. Bye.